Okay. So hello again, everyone. I'm excited to have you here, and we want to welcome you to Flatiron School's Don't Water Down Your Cybersecurity. My name is Catherine Sommerfeld. I'm the Director of Marketing Campaigns and Events here at Flatiron School, and part of my team's job is hosting free introductory workshops like today's event to give you all the opportunity to meet some of our instructors and get a better feel of the Flatiron School experience. Again, as a quick reminder, we'll be using the chat as our main source of communication, so make sure to set that little blue button from host and panelists to everyone so that we can all chat together. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests for today. Michael Crashes is here representing the admissions team, and he will also be in the chat, so if you have questions or need info from him, please feel free to ask. And Joseph Gallowitz is here representing our cybersecurity team, so go ahead and take it away, Joseph.
Thanks, Catherine. How's everyone doing today? Again, my name is Joseph Gallowitz. I'm coming to you from Rochester, New York, in Western New York State. We've got folks all across the country that we work with, and it's great to see everyone joining us today. As Catherine said, I am a instructor, a senior lead instructor for live programs with our cybersecurity program here at Flatiron School. We've got 4 different programs we teach: cybersecurity, software design, and data science. We're going to be focusing on one very specific area of cybersecurity today that maybe a lot of us haven't given a lot of thought to, but it's very interesting. This is not meant to be a cybersecurity seminar in any great detail. It's meant to give you an idea of one problem that our society sort of faces in terms of cybersecurity, and sort of an example of why cybersecurity is as complicated as it is. So let me share my screen here, and we'll get going. Now, as I said, this is entitled "Don't Water Down Our Cybersecurity or Our Cyber Protection," according to the EPA. And the fact is that America's critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, airports, ports, water, electricity, all those sorts of things are incredibly important to keeping our country safe. And I don't know about you, but until I actually did some background research for this presentation, although I got not a lot of information, a lot of knowledge about cybersecurity, I hadn't really thought about our water supply. But it turns out that our water supply is, as much of our infrastructure, in great need of attention in terms of cybersecurity in order to keep all of us safe and all the other reasons, uses of water that there are. People like to say that America's critical infrastructure is only as strong as its weakest link, and it might well be that the water infrastructure is the greatest vulnerability, according to an organization called the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in a 2021 memo. The fact is that we need water for just about everything, including national security, economic safety, and of course public health and safety, and agriculture, and everything else we use water for every day. But there have been significant deficiencies in cybersecurity noted in drinking water and wastewater sectors that are really very significant. An interesting statistic is that in the U.S. we've got roughly 52,000 drinking water and 16,000 wastewater treatment systems, most of which service small to medium communities of less than 50,000 residents. That's an incredibly large number of facilities to stay on top of and protect. But we have to. But for a long time, we haven't really paid much attention to it. We've got the federal government, we've got state and local governments, and a variety of other interests involved. And in a perfect world, managing 52,000 locations would be challenging. But when you talk about budgets and politics and a variety of other things, clearly safeguarding 52,000 or so locations is quite complicated. What we're going to do here is kind of highlight the problem and show what the EPA has done very recently to start pointedly addressing it. Now, one of the things, as in so much of our lives nowadays, is that the water sector, whether it's wastewater or drinking water, is increasingly automated, just like everything else. The digital revolution is everywhere. There would be no need for cybersecurity if we were all offline. But everything's online nowadays, including things like water treatment plants. And that's the problem. Once we put something online, now we don't necessarily invite mischief, but that's definitely a path for malicious cyber activity to rear its head. For example, in February, a couple of years or so ago, in 2021, a hacker almost succeeded in poisoning a water supply by raising the concentration of a caustic agent in the drinking water of a Florida city. After breaching the system online using remote access monitoring and troubleshooting tools. That's not an isolated incident, unfortunately, when you start talking about the number of facilities that we're talking about. While the automation of such facilities through networking and digital systems reduces personnel costs and facilitates compliance with laws and regulations in a lot of ways, very few utilities have invested savings from automation into cyber of their new systems. And interestingly enough, this kind of tracks what's happened in the private sector in terms of cybersecurity. For years and years and years, cybersecurity was just considered a cost sink in private business across all sectors. And it's taken a number of high-profile events to get the attention of leadership across the private sector in order to make cybersecurity not just a cost center and a general pain, but a front and center issue for major leadership in every organization, boards of directors, and things like that. Especially in the last 5 years, there's been great emphasis in making sure that the absolute top leadership in organizations and enterprises understands this is not something that you can just, not pay attention to. Everybody has to do it in our personal lives, in our work lives, and in the commercial or public sectors. The federal government bears responsibility for generally protecting our water supply across the country in conjunction with and cooperation with state and local governments. But again, they're trying to monitor 52,000 or so locations, and that's just not easy. Generally speaking, the EPA is not resourced or organized to support or assess the water supply in terms of the type of scale we're talking about here. But recently, the EPA has tried to do some things to make that work better. Part of its congressional mandate is to assess and recommend improvements to national cyber resilience. And regarding the water sector, we've concluded that there's really, for a long time, been not enough coordination between the EPA and other stakeholders. And what the government has been trying to do, and observers of this sector have been trying to do, is encourage and foster that type of communication. So the one organization, excuse me, I lost their name. A particular foundation has recommended a number of different general ways of protecting our water supply. And the EPA is working with local, state, and local governments to implement some of these things. These recommendations include resourcing and empowering the EPA to succeed as the water sector's major manager and the government lead for cybersecurity in the water sector, directing the EPA's water sector grant programs to help fund and deal with cybersecurity issues, increasing funding for Department of Agriculture's rural cybersecurity programs, directing the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, to increase support for the water sector, increasing the federal government's financial support for water sector associations, encouraging water utilities to increase investments in cybersecurity technology and personnel. As an aside, cybersecurity is not just a technological issue, as oftentimes people think it is, but really it is oftentimes a manpower and personnel issue. In the United States, it's generally estimated that upwards of 600,000 jobs are currently open at all levels of cybersecurity in the United States, and there are many, many jobs overseas as well. Uh, the technology doesn't work without people, and so investments in personnel are critical in making any of this stuff work. Moving on, improving water utilities' access to cybersecurity training and assessment resources is very important. Establishing a joint industry government cybersecurity oversight program is recommended, and amending the American Water Infrastructure Act to increase the cybersecurity effectiveness of water utility risk assessments is also on the list. EPA has stated that cybersecurity represents a substantial increasing threat to the water sector given the relative ease of access to critical water treatment systems from the internet, but also, honestly, in just the real world around us. Not very far from me, for example, there's a water reservoir that's very easy to access, and it has a simple chain link fence around it. You may have seen facilities like this in your area. Getting actual physical access to water is actually not that hard. And one of the biggest problems is among those numbers, and no one actually knows the exact number, is that many of those systems of that 52,000 number that I've been citing do not have any cybersecurity practices instituted at all. They're essentially working, although they have networked systems and they have technology now, cybersecurity has been a cost that they've not invested in for one reason or another. And so efforts to improve cybersecurity through voluntary measures have yielded not a whole lot of progress to protect our vitally important drinking systems. Water security planning has been a critical component of EPA. It's not that they haven't been doing anything since 9/11 through state and local and federal efforts. Sanitary survey programs have been enacted over the last 20 years, and states have worked with PWSs, otherwise known as public water systems, to identify and protect against physical security vulnerabilities. And they've increasingly relied on the use of electronic systems to operate drinking water systems efficiently. As a result, incidents of malicious cyber activity in public water have shut down critical treatment processes, locked up control system networks behind ransomware, and disabled communications used to monitor and control the distribution of system infrastructure like pumping stations. By including cybersecurity in these surveys or equivalent alternative programs, it's an essential tool to address and understand vulnerabilities and mitigate consequences in order to reduce the risk of a successful cyber attack on a public water facility and improve recovery if a cyber incident recurs. In a minute, I'm going to go through just the general framework and steps that we think about in broadest terms of how to both prepare for and respond to cybersecurity incidents. But first, I'm going to finish up with what the EPA has been doing. So a few quotes here, because earlier this year, with all of that as background, the EPA has taken some action to improve cybersecurity resilience in public water. They recently released guidance and a public memo summarizing what they are encouraging state and local governments to do in cooperation with the EPA across all those facilities, all of which are subject to inspection and audit over the course of time. So EPA Assistant Administrator for Water, Radhika Fox, has said the cyber attacks against critical infrastructure facilities, including drinking water systems, are increasing and public water systems are vulnerable. Cyber attacks have the potential to contaminate drinking water, which threatens our public health. She's also said that the EPA has taken action to protect our public water systems by issuing this memorandum requiring states to audit their cybersecurity practices in local water systems. To this end, the EPA has engaged with with states and local governments in order to build awareness, understand issues, and address concerns while developing the memo they released in March and additional guidance. Ann Neuberger, the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technologies, has said that Americans deserve to have confidence in their water system's resilience to cyber attackers. The EPA's new action requires water systems to implement adequate cybersecurity to provide that confidence. EPA has used a flexible approach to enable water systems to craft the most effective ways to protect water services. The EPA's action is another step in the administration's relentless focus on improving the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure by setting minimum cybersecurity measures for owners and operators of water, pipelines, rail, and other critical services that Americans rely on. So in this March 3rd memo, the EPA released, it stressed the need for states to assess cybersecurity risk in drinking water systems in order to protect our drinking water. While some public water systems have taken important steps to improve their cybersecurity, a recent survey and reports of cyber attacks show that many have not adopted basic best practices and are at risk, whether from an individual, a criminal, or some sophisticated state or state-sponsored actor. So now this memo, it requires states to survey cybersecurity best practices in their public water systems. Obviously, this is a major undertaking, and every state has different ideas about how important this is and what they should do. The memorandum does, though, is it conveys the EPA's interpretation that states need to include cybersecurity when they conduct periodic audits of water systems that they call sanitary surveys, and highlight different approaches for states to fulfill this responsibility. So the fact of the matter is these sanitary surveys have always been carried out for years on water systems, but cybersecurity has just never been on the checklist. Well, now essentially it is. Problem with that is that cybersecurity isn't just one thing, and I'm going to get into that in some more detail here in a moment. But the fact of the matter also is that many states have applauded EPA's leadership and guidance in this particular area and are following through on what needs to be done. So what are best practices in cybersecurity? That's the thing. If the EPA is saying that states need to implement best practices in cybersecurity, exactly what does that mean across 52,000 or so facilities and 16,000 waste treatment facilities? On a personal level, many of you probably have some general idea about your own personal cybersecurity, but maybe not so much in terms of an enterprise or a business or an organization or a large facility. Personally, we probably at this point know to avoid pop-ups in our internet browsers, ignore unknown emails, don't click on links you don't recognize, use strong password protection and authentication, use secure Wi-Fi, use your firewall protection at home, at work to make sure that your devices are walled off from intrusion. Invest in security systems depending on your particular situation and needs. Install security software updates and back up your files. And talk to your IT department or other leadership to give you a general idea about what you should do. But that list really does not apply really well when you're talking about industrial facilities like water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants. I don't know if you've ever been to a facility like that. I have had the good fortune to have seen several. And I'll tell you, the one thing that is the same about all of them is that none of them is the same. They are all very different. They are all built at different times, and they all, while they have the same general purpose, either provide clean water or treat wastewater, every single one is virtually unique in its particular structure and situation. So that complicates the problem even further. And so what we can do, though, is, and the EPA provides a lot of guidance on this, as do cybersecurity professionals like myself and my colleagues, and the folks that we train up here at Flatiron School, is generally address 4 different areas that every organization can fit into in terms of some framework in order to bring its cybersecurity up to speed. And those 4 areas are preparation, prevention, mitigation, and restoration. This is what we call a framework, and it's a very simple one, but a lot of information falls under each of these different topics. There are other frameworks that people use, depends on the situation, But these generally, in my opinion, cover all the bases. Um, let's talk about preparation, for example. In terms of the EPA's directive to survey cybersecurity during the public water surveys, that is part of the preparation step. Uh, whether we're talking water facilities or a private company, a large facility, or a worldwide global conglomerate with many locations, you can't really institute or invest in cybersecurity unless you really know what you're trying to protect. And so, one of the first things you need to do is survey your infrastructure, your resources, and what you're trying to accomplish through cybersecurity in order before you can do anything else. Oftentimes, it's people think in terms of set it and forget it firewalls, or just establishing a simple password. But actually, it's much more important that we have a inventory of what we're trying to protect before we move on to any of these other steps. But each of these things, preparation, prevention, mitigation, restoration, they're all very detailed um, endeavors, and each one is almost its own thing, and you could spend days talking about each one. We're not going to do that today, but essentially what the EPA has done here in this context is started the ball rolling to get people thinking about some sort of uh, inventory of what they're trying to protect in order to move on to the next phases of putting in systems to protect the whatever they find in these water treatment plants. Mitigation, what we do when we respond to an attack that has occurred that we weren't able to prevent, and then restoration, putting things back online when they've been knocked off, so that we can get back to work. Um, Now, more specifically than that, though, generally some mitigation strategies include conducting regular risk assessments to identify potential vulnerabilities in systems and infrastructure, training employees on how to identify and prevent cyber attacks, limiting access to criminal infrastructure to authorized personnel only. Those two bullet points right there are really quite important. We say in the cybersecurity world that the weakest link is the human. There wouldn't be any need for cybersecurity if people weren't involved. But the fact of the matter is people oftentimes make mistakes or take security for granted when they should be a lot more careful. So training is important, experience is important, limiting access or granting access on a limited basis is important. So is segregating operational IT systems from other systems so that only critical functions can be easily accessed online. In any sector, though, repeatable documented processes are critical in order to be effective, and the EPA provides a great deal of guidance towards that. Here's some examples of EPA guidance and support. The EPA cyber incident reporting process, I've got that over here in a separate window I want to show you in a moment. The Cybersecurity Evaluation Tool Fact Sheet for Public Safety. That's a PDF you can download and check out. We'll take a quick look at it too, but basically it's a good starting point for just understanding all the many things that are involved in a true cybersecurity survey in order to begin to get on top of the problem. And the Cybersecurity Evaluation Tool, it's a standalone desktop application that allows one to enter all sorts of information about the enterprise that you're in, and getting a report about what it thinks your particular cybersecurity posture is at this time. So that tool, the Cybersecurity Evaluation Tool, provides a systematic, disciplined, repeatable approach for evaluating any organization's security posture. CSET is, I'm sorry, I just repeated myself there. So users can use that software to evaluate their cybersecurity stance using many recognized government and industry standards and recommendations. So in conclusion, cybersecurity, well, actually, before I wanted to show you these, before I move on to the conclusion here, let me switch my screen. So over here in my web browser, I have the EPA cyber incident reporting process. And basically, this is a great tool, and you can easily find it online just by Googling cyber incident reporting process. But what this tool does is that it sort of talks in terms of, the who, what, when, where, why of an incident all in one page. It boils down all of cybersecurity into a very easily digestible system that any of us can look at and understand and implement. It talks about why we do this, where to do it, when to report, and what to report to the federal government in terms of an incident. So a few things here. Why is it important to report cyber incidents? I'll just read this off. A cyber incident could jeopardize drinking water and wastewater utilities by allowing access to private customer employee information, changing chemical levels in water treatment processes, or denying access to critical systems. Cyber incidents result in disruption of operational processes are a particular concern to the federal government. The attacker is a criminal, and reporting an incident allows individuals to look out for suspicious activity, and it enables them to take steps to protect themselves. There's a number of places you can report cyber incidents to as an entity or as an individual. One of the first places to go is law enforcement. And the most obvious place for that is the FBI. Local police might be able to help, but really FBI is the go-to agency for this kind of stuff. And with the FBI, you would submit an internet crime complaint form at the FBI site or contact the local field office, and the FBI will investigate the situation. You can report to CISA, the Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, through its reporting system. You give them a call or email them and fill them in on what's happening with the situation you find yourself in, or contact the EPA in terms of infrastructure. One of the keys to that is that basically always report. If there's any inkling about whether you should report, you should just report. Two other things to point out here is when to report to the federal government. Sometimes people think that you shouldn't report things because they're too insignificant or not important or just simple or silly. The fact of the matter is that's what the government's there for, and using it when necessary, as more and more organizations do, is very important. So when do we want to report to the federal government when something has happened? Well, utilities like water supply facilities are encouraged to report any cyber incident where there's a loss of data, a loss of system availability, or control of systems. If there's an impact to a number of victims, the detection of unauthorized access to or malicious software present on critical information technology systems, if affected critical infrastructure or core government functions are involved, or when there's an impact on national security, economic security, or public health and safety. If any of those things are in play, report to the government and let them take charge. I would also say, when in doubt, report it. Kind of like if you see something, say something. Never just assume that it's going to be fine. If you get that gut feeling that there's a problem here, you probably should follow through on it. And then as far as what to report, not just when to report, but what to report, a cyber incident can be reported at various stages, even when complete information is not available. And oftentimes that's the best time to get help because you're at the beginning of the process. As a matter of fact, all of this is a process, it's very process oriented. Even though a specific person's cyber event may be the worst day in their career, there is a repeatable, measurable, reliable process for how we deal with these things. And so that can give people a lot of comfort when professionals are called in to help with a problem. But as far as the things to report, things like who you are, what company are you with, what organization are you with, what's your position with the company, who experienced the incident at the company, what sort of incident occurred, any other details we have, how and when the incident was detected, how it was remediated, and so forth. This here is the sort of cover sheet to that evaluation tool I mentioned. Both of these things are at CISA.gov, CISA.gov. And if you ever want to check out more information on this, this is a great place to go. I just dropped this in the chat. www.cisa.gov. But essentially, this is just the lead-in sheet for that piece of software I mentioned that allows one to put in information, get an evaluation back, and hopefully get actionable results that you can work on in your particular location in order to make things better. Now, we'll switch back to my slides. So in conclusion, what should be obvious is that, there's no cookie cutter solution to 52,000 or so locations. Each one's unique. And because of that, cybersecurity across just the water sector, not talking about all of the environment, I'm talking about all of infrastructure, just water itself is complicated because there's so many different locations and installations that we have to worry about. So it's complicated under the most ordinary circumstances, but takes on added significance when applied to critical infrastructure that affects our health and safety. So in addition to government guidance, the U.S. needs an ever-growing number of cybersecurity professionals to make all of this protection effective. And the Flatiron School is doing its part to help with the problem by training new cybersecurity professionals every day to join the fight. That's it for my formal chat. Thank you for listening. It's almost 1:40 on the East Coast. Let me just shut my slides down here and open it up to questions or comments about anything I talked about or about the Flatiron School. Michael's here to talk about admissions. I'm here to talk about cybersecurity program, and we would definitely love to chat with you as much as possible. I'm going to drop my email address in the chat in case you want to reach out to me with any follow-up questions that may come up later, or anything you want to know about our cybersecurity program. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Joseph Gallowitz there, and feel free to check out my profile there and connect with me there on LinkedIn as well. Anyway, thank you for paying attention. That's weird. Let's see. Thanks for that comment there, Sherry. Sure, I will type my answer into the Q&A. We'll just scan over here, see if there are any questions, or maybe Catherine has seen something that's hanging out there that needs to be addressed.
I don't think so. I think the majority was stuff that Michael was able to address.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, we will be sending out the recording of this webinar within the next 3 business days. Joseph, I'll also be grabbing that deck from you so that we can include it in that email so that everyone will have it. If anyone has any questions for either Joseph or Michael, now's the time to ask. I know Michael dropped his information in the chat a couple of times. If you are interested in learning more about Flatiron School, you can absolutely reach out to him. And there's his info again. Otherwise, if there is nothing else, then I just want to thank you all again for joining us today. Again, if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. As a reminder, you will be getting a copy of the presentation within 3 business days. And if you want to see any of our previous events, and I know we did have some technical issues yesterday, they will be on our YouTube. So you can always check our YouTube channel. And if you subscribe, you'll be notified when we upload new events. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you.